Good morning, Year 5, or good afternoon, depending on when you're watching this. It's Mrs. Latcham again. We're looking today at chapter 11 and 12, but first the vipers from chapters 9 and 10. What words and phrases did David Ellman use to describe what Mina looks like? Well, he called her little. He says that she's got hair as black as coal and the kind of eyes that can see right through you. Can you explain how the author engages us with Mina's personality? Well, my thought was that we tend to feel curious when we meet curious and passionate people, and Mina is definitely passionate in the birds that she's drawing. She is interested and therefore interesting. Questions are raised in our minds about, for example, why does Mina want to see the baby, and why does she behave scornfully or dismissively of Michael? And finally, vocabulary. What word or phrase tells you that Skellig is critical of his own body? Well, you can see on page 29 that he referred to, he says, most of me is arthritis, he squeaked. He's the one that's ruining me bones, turns you to stone and crumbles you away. Well, arthritis is inflammation of the joints, which gives you a lot of pain and is often associated with getting older or having had an injury. Okay, chapters 11 and 12. What can you infer about the references to Skellig's unusual shoulders? What does the last page suggest will happen next? And can you order these events as they happened? Mrs. Dando speaks with Michael, Dr. Death comes to the house, and Rasputin teaches the children all about evolution. Okay, chapter 11. Next morning, Dad said he could hardly move. He was all bent over. He said his back was killing him. He was stiff as a blinking board. Where's those aspirin? He yelled down the stairs. Mum laughed. All this exercise will do him good, she said. It'll get the fat off him. He yelled again. I said, where's those blooming aspirin? I kissed the baby and ran to catch the bus to school. That morning we had science with Rasputin. He showed us a poster of our ancestors, of the endless shape-changing that had led to us. There were monkeys and apes, the long line of ape-like creatures in between, then us. It showed how we began to stand straighter, how we lost most of our hair, how we began to use tools, how our heads changed shape to hold our big brains. Coot whispered it was all a load of rubbish. His dad had told him there was no way that monkeys could turn into men. Just had to look at them. Stands to reason. I asked Rasputin if we'd keep on changing shape, and he said, who knows, Michael? Maybe evolution will go on forever. Maybe we'll go on changing forever. Beep, whispered Coot. I'm not going to repeat that, but you can read it right there. We drew the skeleton of an ape and the skeleton of a man. I remembered what Mina had said, and I looked really closely at the poster. I put my hand up and said, what are shoulder blades for, sir? Rasputin crinkled his face up. He reached behind his back and felt his shoulder blades and smiled. I know what my mother used to tell me, he said, but to be honest, I really haven't got a clue. Afterwards, Coot hunched his shoulders up and lowered his head and stuck his chin out. He lurched through the corridor, grunting and running at the girls. Lucy Carr started screaming. Stop it, you pig, she said. Coot just laughed. Pig? Said Coot. I'm not a pig, I'm a gorilla. And he ran at her again. In the yard, when I played football, I realised how tired I was, with being awake so much during the night. Leaky kept asking what was the matter with me. I was playing rubbish. Mrs. Dando came again, when I was standing by myself at the side of the field. What's up, she said. Nothing. And how's the little one? Fine. I looked at the ground. Sometimes I think she stops breathing, I said. Then I look at her and she's fine. She will be fine, she said. You'll see. Babies so often bring worry with them into the world, but you'll be wrestling with her before you know where you are. She touched me on the shoulder. For a moment, I wondered about telling her about the man in the garage. Then I saw Leaky, so I shrugged her off and I ran back yelling, On me head! On me head! It was a dozy afternoon, some easy maths, then Miss Clark's reading us another story. this time about Ulysses and his men trapped in the cave with the one-eyed monster Polyphemus. I was nearly asleep as she told us how they had escaped by pretending to be sheep. I took my skeleton picture home. I kept looking at it on the bus. There was an old bloke sitting beside me with a Jack Russell on his knee. He smelt of pea and pipe smoke. "What's that?" he said. "Picture of what we used to be like long ago," I said. "Can't say I remember that," he said, "and I'm pretty ancient." He started going on about how he'd seen a monkey in a circus in his young days. They'd trained it to make tea, but it was nothing like a person, really. But maybe it had just been practicing. There was spit dribbling at the side of his mouth. I could see he wasn't all there. "There's a man in our garage," I said, when he'd shut up. "Aye," he said. The Jack Russell yapped. He put his head around his mouth. He seemed to be thinking hard. "Aye," he said again. "And there was the loveliest lass on the trapeze. You could swear she could nearly fly." Chapter 12. Dr. Death was there when I got home. He was in the kitchen with Mum and Dad. He had the baby on his knee and he was fastening her vest up. He winked at me when I came in. Dad poked me in the ribs. I saw how flat Mum's face was. "It's this damn place," she said, when Dr. Death had gone. "How can she thrive when it's all so dirty and all in such a mess?" She pointed out of the window. "See what I mean?" she said. "Bloomin' stupid toilet, bloomin' ruins, a bloomin' stupid wilderness." She started crying. She said we should never have left Random Road. We should never have come to this stinking derelict place. She walked back and forward in the kitchen with the baby in her arms. "My little girl," she murmured, "my poor little girl." "The baby has to go back to hospital," Dad whispered, "just for a while, so the doctors can keep an eye on her. That's all. She'll be fine." He stared out of the window into the wilderness. "I'll work harder," he said. "I'll get it all ready for when she comes back again." "I'll help," I said, but he didn't seem to hear. We had bread and cheese and tea. The baby lay there in a little carry cot beside us. Mum went upstairs to put together the things the baby would need in hospital. I put the skeleton picture on the table and looked at it, but couldn't concentrate on it. "That's good," Dad said, but he wasn't looking at it properly either. I went up and sat on the landing. I watched Mum throwing vests and nappies and cardigans into the little case. She kept clicking her tongue and going, "Ah!" like she was mad at everything. She saw me there and tried to smile, but started to click her tongue again. When she was finished, she said, "Don't worry, it won't be for long." She leaned down and put her hand on my head. "What are shoulder blades for?" I said. "Oh, Michael," she said. She shoved past me like I was really getting on her nerves, but when she was halfway down the stairs, she stopped and came back to me. She slipped her fingers under my shoulder blades. "They say that shoulder blades are where your wings were when you were an angel," she said. "They say they're where your wings will grow again one day." "It's just a story, though," I said. "A fairy tale for little kids, isn't it? Who knows? But maybe one day we all had wings, and one day we'll all have wings again." "Do you think the baby had wings?" "Oh, I'm sure that one had wings. Just got to take one look at her. Sometimes I think she's never quite left heaven and never quite made it all the way here to earth." She smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. "Maybe that's why she has such trouble staying here," she said. I watched her, wondered what she'd say if I told her now about the man in the garage. I didn't tell her. Before she went away, I held the baby for a while. I touched her skin and her tiny, soft bones. I felt the place where her wings had been. Then we went in the car to the hospital. We went to the baby's ward and left Mum and the baby there. Dad and I drove back to Faulkner Road. We sat in the big, empty house and looked at each other. Then he went back to painting the dining room walls. I drew a skeleton with wings rising from the shoulder blades. I looked out of the window and saw Mina sitting high up on the top of the back wall. Okay. So, what can you infer about the references to Skellig's unusual shoulders? And Michael asking about shoulder blades. What does the last page suggest will happen next? And in what order did these things happen? Okay, see you next time.